Good evening and welcome to Curiosity Feeds the Cat. This is the first episode of what I call Professor Criticat and Friends. And my first guest, Barry Desborough, is Professor Criticat's friend as well as my friend. We actually met on a group on Facebook where we tend to discuss evolution and creationism. Barry is a fascinating man. What he doesn't know about endogenous retroviruses, which is the title of our discussion today, it's amazing, actually. So anyway, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Barry Desborough to tonight's episode, and the title of tonight's episode is Endogenous Retroviruses. Good evening, Barry, and welcome to Curiosity Feeds the Cat. How are you?
Thank you, David. Yeah, hello.
You're welcome.
Nice to see you.
You too. I mean, we've kind of been conversing with each other,
communicating, yes, but not face to face like this. And it's very nice to be able to do that.
It is. I finally put a face to all the fantastic comments. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this. I really appreciate it. Now, obviously, we met on the group where you tended to comment a lot about endogenous retroviruses. So, but before I ask you anything about that, I would like to ask for a bit of a background so that my viewers know who you are, what you do, and how you ended up on this path, if you like.
Right. Okay, I'm English. I've retired. I retired quite early. In fact, I live in France at the moment. Like quite a lot of English people, they love the country. Anyway, I retired early, and I used to be a school teacher, and I had another career as a software engineer. When I retired, I decided I wanted to continue learning. And one thing that particularly interested me was trying to understand human nature. And I'd always had an interest in evolution. The college, which is incidentally was a Christian-founded college, they taught us evolution and even took us to visit Darwin's down house and so on.
Okay,
they
wow.
had a problem with evolution. And I got into, in my studies after I'd retired, what is called evolutionary psychology. And the basic idea of that is that the human brain is just like any other organ of the human body. It is being shaped by evolution. And if we want to understand human nature, we need that perspective, where we came from, why we are as we are. And I've always been disturbed and distressed by aspects of human nature. People can be so xenophobic, so hateful of the out group and so forth. I was a service child. I moved around the world a lot, and they say travel broadens the mind. It doesn't.
Yes, it does.
And you're exposed to different cultures, different ways of life, different peoples, and you realize that everybody is a human being, all the same.
Yes.
Why are we so horrible to each other? And that was my motivation to start studying evolution in much more detail. When I was doing that, I was talking to these quite high-powered academics in America. Online, I was talking to them. And I hadn't realized that in America, half the population, nearly half the population, is horrified by the idea of evolution. They oppose it and so forth. So, I thought this is not good. They're peddling lies about our history and our nature and so forth. So I got into discussion for my sins with creationists. And sooner or later, I came across these endogenous retroviruses that struck me as the most powerful, obvious evidence that evolution is true. So I've spent years studying this and writing a blog and an FAQ on endogenous retroviruses because I believe that to be the most clear-cut, undeniable evidence that we evolved. So I've spent a lot of my time battling creationists, saying, look, you're wrong about evolution, you misunderstand it, you misrepresent it, you attribute evils to it which are just false. And we better move on. It's a lot better if we understand our own natures, and we have to understand that we are evolved creatures. Okay.
Wow, Barry. Thank you very much for that. It is actually really, really fascinating that you went to a Christian school.
Yes, in England, when they created the National Education Service, they incorporated a lot of schools. Lots of little villages had Christian-founded schools for children.
Okay.
And the Anglican tradition is not anti-evolution. It's pro knowledge, and because they valued knowledge, they put a lot of effort into founding schools. And when it came to creating a national system, a lot of these schools were already there. They're called C of E schools, Church of England schools.
Church of England, yes.
Yeah, and it's a very broad church and a very liberal type of, and that was my exposure to Christianity. Is that version of Christianity that I've exposed to, and I'm quite fond of it myself, even though I'm not a believer.
That's really interesting, because I was exposed to a different version of Christianity, and ironically, I didn't discard religion because of science or evolution. I discarded religion because I read the Bible.
Yes.
And I thought that there's absolutely no way any of this could possibly be true. It's horrifying. Just think of it. So I don't want to, because I can quite easily get distracted and go on a completely different tangent.
Yeah, but just to say, I get on with liberal Christians
of course.
that don't deny science, and my background is a family that had no interest in belief. So I've been a lifelong atheist. Not because I've been indoctrinated in it. It's just that I've not been indoctrinated in a religion. So
it's a conclusion that you come to after looking for the opposing claim, if you like.
Yes.
Nobody. I didn't even know that there was a word for it until I went to America. I just knew that I don't believe any of this. I don't believe a lot of superstitious stuff that I was being told. I wanted evidence for a lot of things. I was a nightmare in school because I was always asking questions about certain things. I come from a very, very superstitious climate about juju and all sorts of outlandish stories. But anyway, maybe that's a conversation for another day. I'm pretty sure we will have plenty of stuff to talk about. And I would certainly love to have you on again. So going back to our topic,
yes.
What exactly are ERVs, or what exactly are endogenous retroviruses?
Okay, ERV is an acronym. Some people call it ERV, but I don't. That's a bit ugly. ERV.
I like ERVs. Yes.
It stands for ERV, Endogenous Retrovirus. We go backwards with the V at the end. We all by now know what a virus is. It's a particle that invades our bodies and causes us diseases. Retrovirus is a particular type of virus. HIV is an example, and its trick is to convert its genome into DNA, invade our cells, and inject its DNA into our cells. The cells then dutifully transcribe the viral DNA, resulting in the production of more retroviruses. So it's how the virus replicates itself. It does a trick. It does a dirty trick on our cells and fools them into making more viruses. And by the way, makes us very ill. Okay,
so Sorry, carry on.
The endogenous bit, the E for endogenous, means that sometimes these viruses can put their DNA into one of our germline cells, a sperm or egg cell, or a zygote, for example, and that DNA gets copied when the organism grows and develops, and it also gets into their reproductive cells, so it becomes heritable. They can pass on this viral DNA down the generations. So an endogenous means, endo means in, genus, genes. It is within our genome. And it's not just one, it's estimated to be about 200,000 of the things in all our genomes. Over our evolutionary history, we've acquired all of these viral DNA in our genomes. It's in our species. It's part of our DNA.
And so, as I understand it, all humans have snippets of these endogenous retroviruses.
Yes, they do. The vast majority of them we all have in common. So there are a few that haven't spread throughout the population entirely yet, but the vast majority have. And the really interesting thing is that we all have them, which means that every individual that first acquired this endogenous retrovirus is our ancestor. We are all related, just like mitochondrial Eve. We all have the same ancestor that gave us our mitochondria. If we're men, our Y chromosomes, we can trace back to a single man who donated his Y chromosomes to all of us. So he's a common ancestor of all humanity. And each ERV represents an ancestor that first acquired a retroviral infection in their sperm or egg cell. So they are all our ancestors. Every one of them are our ancestors.
It was rather unfortunate, though, don't you think, that they decided to name the matrilineal ancestor as Adam and Eve, because obviously, clearly, creationists saw that and they went, aha!
They have picked up on that. Yes, I've got a page on that on my blog and on my site, and I hope when you put out this video, you'll put links to my material.
Definitely, definitely.
And it goes into mitochondrial Eve was not the first ancestor of our mitochondria, but the last common ancestor. Same with Y Adam, and it was just a bit of a joke, if you like, that they were called that. But that doesn't stop creationists picking up on that.
And it was also, sorry, carry on.
No, that's okay.
It's also important to note that it's not actually a person; it's more of a title, as opposed to a person. And like you said, sorry, go on.
Each of those was an individual, but the main point is that the mitochondrial DNA and the Y chromosome are the only things we've inherited from them, because when we reproduce, all our DNA gets shuffled up and mixed around and all of that. And I always think of it as like an hourglass image. All the genes are coming in. Let's try and get this from a big population. They come down to us, combine in us. Then we have children, and that splits apart and gets diluted back in the gene pool again. So it's only those bits of DNA that they have bequeathed to us. It's all the rest of the population has bequeathed their bits of DNA. So it's a bit of a misunderstanding of how genetics works and how sexual reproduction works, to think that mitochondrial DNA could have been the unique female ancestor of all humans. All she did was give her mitochondrial DNA and nothing else.
And obviously the process is almost like shuffling a deck of cards, isn't it?
Exactly. Yes. I've used that analogy as well.
Yeah.
You take decks of cards, and you take in turn one from one suit from one pack, one from another pack, and you shuffle them together. And every generation, every time there's a human mating, that DNA, the two packs get shuffled together, and half of the cards come from one and half from the other.
Which is precisely the reason why I look different to my sister and my brother, because even though we share the deck of the card is the same, the order of the cards is different. It's actually fascinating.
Different cards. Yeah. You did you say your sister?
Yeah, my sister.
Yeah. Okay. You and your sister would have had half your DNA from your father, half from your mother, but different halves.
Yes. Yes, because
that accounts for the difference between you.
It's changing all the time, and it's also fascinating that when you hear the argument that there are no such things as beneficial mutations, and that mutation, you've heard creationists say mutations doesn't add new information, but it does, because the variation of alleles that you find in the human population actually clearly debunks the idea that we're all
there are always novel combinations of what's already there, combinations that have never been there before. And you take mutations. Mutation is just a variety. I think of it as something like somebody trying to hack your password. Okay? You generate the password at random.
Yeah. Okay? And the amount of times they get it wrong and so on.
Try again. Doesn't work. Try again. Most of the time it doesn't work. Eventually you will get there. If
that's actually I've
security system is bad, eventually you'll get there. And that you've gained information. You've gained the password to your account. That's information that wasn't there and only came about by trial and error.
Fantastic. So essentially we all humans have these snippets of ancient viruses that infected our common ancestor, and as I understand it, all these ancient viruses are lodged in our genome in exactly the same location.
That's the key to it, because you have viruses in the environment. The jargon is they're exogenous instead of endogenous. They're outside, exo. Now, if you catch a virus from the environment, it's going to infect your cells. It's not going to infect every cell. Where it inserts its DNA is not going to be the same in every cell. And that's a crucial point about the argument from endogenous retroviruses. There is an enzyme called integrase, which does a cut and paste in your DNA. It takes the viral DNA, cuts your DNA open, inserts the viral DNA, and closes it up again. That enzyme cannot target specific locations in your DNA. So when you see in your DNA, which we have seen, hundreds of thousands of these inserts, all of them in every single cell, all of them in exactly the same location as one another, there is no other explanation than they have come from your ancestors. Because when your DNA starts out as a single cell, a zygote. If that's got all the retroviruses in it, normal development will reproduce that single cell that you start out as, and will produce DNA in every daughter cell with retroviruses in exactly the same locations. Now, external infection from exogenous retroviruses, external retroviruses, cannot do that. There's no way that could happen. And that's the crucial point. the only viable explanation as to why you have endogenous retroviruses in all of your cells, each of them in exactly the same location, can only be explained by the fact that all of your cells are daughter cells of the cell that you started out as. In other words, they're inherited.
Because it's almost.
Yeah.
Sorry,
that
go
means
on.
they're inherited from your ancestors and their ancestors and so on, going back to the original endogenizations.
Because it's almost like expecting someone to shoot 3.5 billion bullets and they all land in the same spot, isn't it?
And creationists, we mentioned creationists, they're desperate to try and explain this away. So they will cling to studies that say retroviruses prefer certain DNA regions next to protein coding cells or next to other regions in the cell. But that is true, that people were desperate when the HIV, when the AIDS epidemic started, trying to get a handle on what was going on. Is there anything we can find out that helps us combat this disease? And so they tried desperately to find, was there any pattern to where these retroviruses inserted their DNA?
Okay.
There are general tendencies. So, as I say, neoprotein coding genes, and so, but these are just regions. I liken it to road traffic statistics. You have areas of stretches of road that are notorious for the number of accidents that happen in them. So they're more likely to happen in those areas, just like the retrovirus is more likely to insert in certain types of areas. But it's equivalent to looking at a report of a traffic accident and seeing that it involves exactly the same vehicles, the same time, exactly the same place, the same occupants, and then saying, well, this is coincidence. No, you're looking at copies of the same reports of the same accidents. There's no way that it doesn't go down to specific searching for the words. You may have to cut this.
That's fine.
Specific base pair resolution of where these integrations occur.
Okay.
Whatever survey you do, you get a statistical tendency. And if you do, it doesn't explain exact locations down to that resolution. But creationists being what they are, they see ERVs, these retroviruses target certain areas. That explains why they're all in exactly the same location. No, it doesn't. But they cling on to these straws. So it's a typical thing of creationists. They cling on to the language, and there we go.
I have so much admiration for what you do in that group because I don't know how you do it.
It's my passion.
Yeah. But the thing is, I read some of the comments, and I think, for me, all versions of creationism are as dead as a dodo.
No.
And so years ago, when I was still a bit more, I suppose, a bit of an eager beaver, I used to engage creationists. And then I realized that not only do they often misrepresent the science, and often I think it's deliberate, but once I came across creationists who understand the science, but then moved the goalpost and said, well, actually, biological evolution is a fact, but our guy did it. That is when I said, no, I'm not doing this anymore. Sorry, carry on.
Something I really have a struggle to understand. And I love to, if there's a problem, I love to try and understand why it is a problem. And I find it very, very difficult to understand the psychology of these people. And you say about telling untruths. Somebody said, I wish I could remember who it was, creationists lie because they have to. So, it's...
I've heard that before. I'm trying to remember who said it now.
They do, I think, believe that they are justified in lying and distorting because their cause is a just one. And it's all based, for whatever reason, on a complete misunderstanding, misapprehension of what evolution is about. They all think it's atheistic. It's not. I mean,
it's not. It's got nothing to do with
are
it.
more
Yeah,
likely to accept it because they have no crazy reasons not to. But they think it's an evil that has to be combated. So they will use any means they can to combat.
I hate to use the word theory, but I'm going to use it in the layman's term.
Yeah.
I have a theory, and I think I kind of understand why they fight so hard. And this is what I think. I think that it is very, very difficult to have built your entire sense of self and your identity on an idea.
Yeah.
Where humans don't like to admit that they're wrong. And we most certainly do not like to admit that we've been fooled or conned. So now imagine you built your idea, your sense of self on an idea. Since you were a child, you were told this idea is absolutely true. It is, it's faultless. And then somebody comes along and says, well, actually, do you know that foundation that your house is built on is made out of sand?
Yes. Yeah.
Everything you think about yourself is a lie. It's all nonsense.
Yeah.
Most people will struggle with this.
Yeah.
Most people will say, no, this cannot possibly be true. My parents couldn't have lied to me. My family couldn't have lied to me.
You're a priest, you're a pastor, everybody.
Something that I hold so dear cannot possibly be true, cannot possibly be a lie, because what would it say about who I am? Or who I think I am. Now, some of us don't struggle with it as such. I certainly didn't. For me, it was just, okay, this is nonsense, and that was it. So I actually understand why people struggle. I also understand that we live in a very, very difficult, unpredictable, harsh world. The idea of a celestial nanny can be appealing, Barry, if you really think about it.
Remember that many theists, Christians, are quite accepting of evolution. They find a way, and we're talking about the Church of England, the Catholic Church, there are organizations like Biologos, which
it's actually one of my favorite websites.
Evolution, but they're all Christians. I quote a Christian pastor who is a real expert in ERVs. And
who's that?
Diseases caused by them. Sorry?
Who is that?
Graham Finlay. I'll put a link to him.
I didn't even know he was a pastor. I've got one of his books
Human
here
Evolution
somewhere.
it's called. And he writes for Biologos. You got the book?
I've got the book here somewhere.
Excellent.
Because I've taken excerpts from it. Sorry, carry on.
You don't have to deny evolution to be a Christian. And I think you were talking about the people who are brought up with creationist ideas. One thing I can understand is that if you're brought up in an environment where everybody is a creationist and everybody thinks you are an awful, evil person if you think otherwise. So you're brought up in these little towns in America, for example, where the majority are anti-evolution. It's very, very hard to go against that. You are a pariah if you start to doubt these things and say, oh, wait a minute, let's have a look and see if this is actually right.
It's amazing though, because when I left religion, I didn't tell anyone for a while because I was still in Nigeria.
I understand that.
But I didn't. It wasn't because I was afraid of friends, or I think it was just my parents were just going to give me a hard time. So I thought it would be better for me. It was more prudent for me.
It's not inconsiderable.
Yeah.
And some parts of the world you can get hacked to pieces.
Absolutely. It was more prudent for me because I knew I was leaving the country soon. So I just thought, I'll just keep it to yourself. You don't need to tell anyone. And you can tell them once you're gone. But I again, like I said, it's easy to get distracted because there's so much about what you do that I find absolutely fascinating. There is so much about your dialogue with creationists. There's sometimes I read and my jaw, my mouth is just like agape. I'm just like, just wow. And when you talk about
making an impression on some people,
I'm sure you are. It's just your tolerance and patience is what I really have a lot of admiration for.
Yeah, getting riled up doesn't get you anywhere anyway. So
no, well, I'm not even talking about getting riled up. I don't even get. I just cannot be bothered because I love reading biologos, and I refer to them a lot. Yeah. I still can't wrap my head around how they justify, the science with their version of creationism. I actually find it quite amusing. But anyway, this is maybe something that we need to talk about another time. Do you see what I mean about how easily we have so much in common, how easily we can just go off on a tangent? So,
well, no, it's interesting. I think we need more talks to.
We are going to have. Oh, absolutely, we are going to have more talks because I actually I want to talk about creationism and evolution and why I personally just. For me, I might if I'm going to be debating about Christianity, I might as well be talking about Zoroastrianism because for me they're just as valid as each other. Do you know what I mean? So I just don't bother. But anyway, back to ERVs.
Back to the subject.
Yes, back to the subject. Oh, God, honestly, what would you say? What would you say is the genetic evidence that ERVs actually do come from ancient viruses?
Yeah. Okay, especially since the AIDS pandemic, or whatever you want to call it, a lot of interest has gone into studying retroviruses, and I've said how particular retroviruses are, what they do, inject their genomes into ours and force our cells to make copies. So the actual structure of the virus's genome has been extensively studied. We can see each gene within the virus and what it does. And there's an end gene, they call it jargon. There's a gene that allows the virus to attach to a host cell, the target cell. There's another one that opens up its guts into your cell, and another one that converts its RNA genome into DNA ready to be injected. And then the enzyme integrase mentioned before, which actually does the cut and paste into
paste,
DNA. So when we studied our own genomes, we weren't looking for it. We were just listing what the DNA bases were in the human genome, the Human Genome Project. And we discovered within our genomes exactly the same genetic sequences as you find in retroviruses. What are they doing there? There's no good explanation as to why they should be there from evolution, other than they have been hacked into our DNA. It's the only other word for it, a hack. So these sequences within our DNA are the same sequences as you find in these retroviruses like HIV. So it's the genetics which is the main reason we suppose that these sequences derived from retroviruses.
Would I be correct in assuming, and I'm just trying to go back in my memory bank now, so I think if I remember correctly, there were 3 genes in particular. There was the ENV, the envelope. I think that's an envelope, and there's POL and GAG.
GAG, POL,
right?
Yes.
Okay,
and all of those have a function in the replication cycle of a virus.
What does POL do?
Other sense sitting in our genomes. There's no other explanation for why they are there, but they have been injected into our DNA by viruses.
So ENV is the one that allows the virus to fuse to the host cell, right?
Yeah.
And what do the other two do? Or is it one?
GAG, POL, ENV, they're all multiple genes. They do lots of little different functions.
Okay, so it's not just one function.
The main functions are called reverse transcriptase.
Okay.
And I can't remember offhand whether it's a GAG or POL gene.
Okay.
But the reverse transcriptase takes the RNA genome of the virus, gets the cell to make a DNA version of it. Mm-hmm. DNA and RNA are very, very similar. They only differ by one base. Yeah. In preparation for integration into the host DNA,
into the host cell,
which is the integrase. So those are the essentials: ENV, reverse transcriptase, and integrase.
Wow, and so there's a lot of genetic evidence that they are essentially remnants of viruses. Yeah. And have we been able to compare them to, say, retroviruses in other animals?
Well,
when I say,
yes, I mean, we're learning more and more about these viruses in other creatures, even in plants, in fish, and all sorts of creatures. These virus elements are throughout life, and some people think they are extremely ancient. They're at the beginning of the generation of life.
Oh yeah, I mean, sorry, go on. No, sorry, go on.
No, it's just that they all exhibit the same types of genes because they all have the same function. They all have the same aim, if you like.
They do the same things.
A host cell to get it reproduced. So all of these things have these genes or equivalents of these genes in common throughout the living world.
And is there not a case of a retrovirus in koalas, for example, that is actually currently?
Yeah, there's a very good example. It's very sad, actually. Koalas.
Yes, it is.
They call it KORV, koala retrovirus. And before all these horrible, huge fires in Australia that burnt these poor creatures alive, they were dying from a cancer, and they investigated this cancer.
Leukemia, wasn't it?
They put it down, and they put it down to a retrovirus. And when they studied it, they found that it was endogenizing. It was exogenous in that it was out in the environment and spreading around the koalas, but also they found it in sperm and egg cells and in the DNA of the. So this is a retrovirus caught in the act of endogenizing, becoming part of the genome, and it's a good point against the creationists who say, "Oh, these were designed into the genomes by the intelligent designer, God, what have you, for a purpose." They do not exist in subpopulations of certain koalas.
Yes,
geographically separated from them. In certain subpopulations, they are in different places in the genomes, and the retrovirus itself bears a striking resemblance to GALV, gibbon ape leukemia virus.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
What they call a spillover event. Somehow the Gibbons virus has crossed over to koalas. But the main thing to take home about it is that it shows that it's not an originally designed part of the koala genome. And this is an argument that creationists try to make, that all of these elements were designed into our genomes. They didn't come from external retroviruses.
I'm sorry, Barry, and this is one of the reasons why I really don't engage creationists. Everything we know about the mechanisms of
It is
disease,
frustrating.
they should be ashamed to even talk about their God.
Yes.
Honestly,
Yeah, I
they
know.
really.
Yeah.
Some of the explanations, I'm sorry to say, just sound insane. And then you listen to them talk about how it was because a woman and a man listened to a talking snake and ate a magic fruit. I mean, come on, just
Yes.
go away.
Yeah, that's believable, but hard science is not believable.
It's Barry. I mean,
And this is what I really struggle to understand. I really struggle, and I don't know. Maybe I'm.
my God is good. My God.
I'm just hoping that my work will persuade some people away from this path. You know,
There are
some are entrenched. I liken it to being, you know, the idea of a lobster pot. A pot with a little hole. Whoops.
What was that?
Yeah.
Ghost. It's Satan. It's Satan. They found me.
Satan, yeah.
Do you know what's really funny? I was actually thinking of taking that down anyway, because I just realized there's a banner at the top right hand corner of the screen anyway. So I thought, oh, I forgot that was there.
Include this in your video that you put on, because that is what is going to stick in people's minds.
Sorry, what's that again?
I said, make sure you keep this in your video.
I mean,
because that is what's going to stick in people's minds.
Yeah, Professor Criticat fell down.
But yeah, I was saying about a lobster pot. I liken creationism to be something that you can get into, but you can't seem to be able to get out of, and it annoys me and fascinates me how you can be presented with all of this evidence, all of this reason, and still fail to realize that you were mistaken.
Let's even forget about all the other peripheral stuff, and let's even look at. And I know we promise not to digress, but we can't help it.
Well,
let's even imagine that what they claim is true. Okay. Yeah. So, two people in a garden who couldn't possibly know the ramifications of what they were about to do had a conversation with a snake.
Yes.
Now, you have to ask yourself, how did they learn to talk? We know how babies learn to talk by mimicking their parents in a pre-existing language, right? So they learned to talk. The snake also was in the class when they were obviously inventing the first language. And then they listened to the snake, ate the fruit, and God was so cheesed off by this, he created pathogens and created parasites and cancer. And I'm like, come on already.
Original sin. What have we done to deserve
original stupidity? I'm sorry to say. It makes no...
done nothing.
Who would look at a child dying of malaria and say, that's because two people listened to a talking snake?
Yeah.
What does it say about that kind of a person that can actually believe...
Do they have a working brain?
Anyway, let's digress again. Code on bias. Sorry, code on bias.
Code on bias. Yeah, sorry, this is a little technical.
Okay.
But the DNA base pairs, ACGT, they're named. Everyone should be familiar that there are 4 bases in the DNA, and the DNA is a string of base pairs. Okay. Now, when the cell starts to read the DNA, it will read certain sections of them in order to make proteins.
Okay.
And you can think of the base pairs as like letters. We gave them letters, CGAT.
Yeah.
And then you can think of them as making up words. But all the protein coding words in the DNA are just 3 base pairs.
Okay.
CAG, TAC, etc., etc. Those think of those as words, and that's a codon. It's a triplet of DNA base pairs. And when the cell reads it to transcribe the DNA, it reads 3 base pairs at a time, another 3 base pairs, another 3 base pairs, and it turns out that each 3 base pairs, each codon, creates eventually an amino acid. So one triplet makes one amino acid. So I hesitate to use the word code because
I know. They've jumped on that.
It's just a shorthand. It's just a metaphor. So these triplet codons code for amino acids, and eventually those get stitched together to make proteins. Now, this coding mechanism has redundancy in it. It's called a degenerate code. There are different triplets that can code for the same amino acid. So CAT, probably this is not right, but CAT codes for an amino acid. GTA codes for the same amino acid. I'm sure that's not right, but it's the idea.
It's the
different codons, different triplets can code for the same amino acid. Now, I talked about the base pairs being like letters and the codons, the triplets being like words. These are words in a language. The best analogy I've heard is that the English language is very different if you go from Nigeria to Britain to New Zealand to America. It sounds different. There's a different accent to it. But the words mean the same. Just like the codons different codons can mean the same thing. If you like, in the analogy, they sound different, but they mean the same. Viruses use a particular accent. They prefer to use certain codons, and other organisms prefer to use others. So we call it a viral codon bias if it's something that viruses use. The alternative is non-viral DNA, which may tend to use different codons for the same amino acids. Now, why in our DNA should there be stretches of DNA that have the viral accent, if you like, to them?
Why would they be speaking virus?
Exactly. They speak in a virus accent. And why should that be? The obvious answer to that is that they originated as viruses. What else?
Viruses.
So, it's just, there's no other explanation for that. It's a nice little piece of evidence. It's not conclusive, but it's another.
It's just part of a bigger picture
And again, just going generally, when you look at science, you have a concept called consilience. And that is that everything dovetails together. You explain one thing in one terms, such as ERVs come from retroviruses. You explain another thing in other similar terms, so codon bias and blah, 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 and it all hangs together. Creationists, on the other hand, just have ad hoc explanations. Why does it look like there was a global flood? Oh, it just happened to be that the flood laid down these layers. And why is there faunal succession? Why is there different types of animals in each layer? Oh, clams could run away from the flood faster than velociraptors. And they're all ad hoc. It doesn't hang together. Consilience is science hanging together. If one theory or hypothesis hangs and knits together with another one, that's more evidence that you're on the right track and you're getting to the truth.
It is. Thank you for that. It is actually crazy when you really think about it, because if evolution wasn't true, paleontology as a discipline wouldn't exist, right? Geology, you couldn't even make sense of geology. There wouldn't be such a thing as paleoclimatology, paleoanthropology, paleogenomics. I mean, we could just go on and on and on. Evolution is their favorite whipping boy, but these people are just science deniers. And I remember on the group that we're both in, I was on a thread, as I often do, and I just read the comments. I very, very rarely comment. And I remember just saying, why do oil companies hire micropaleontologists? Not a single creationist addressed, not a single one. And one of our members, I think it was Aviva Rothschild, actually said, it's funny how nobody's actually dealt with your rare question, because when I actually understood that years ago now, it was a geologist that actually told me. I mean, they don't use micropaleontologists as much as they used to back in the day, because obviously the technology is caught up and they can use other means. But it turns out that they actually look through the layers for microfossils. And these particular microfossils, there's a specific assemblage of microfossils that you can predict you'll find in the same layer all over the world. This is why there is
that. If you ask why is that, the creationists only have ad hoc sort of non-explanations. They don't have
Satan put it there.
And by the way, we're moving away from topic, but that's all right.
Yes, I know.
You can use it if you want or not. One of my favorite guys I used to be on bulletin board discussion groups with is a Christian, and he started out as a young Earth creationist. And he was, oh my goodness, I'll have to look up his name hasn't. Shit. It's gone from my head. I'll come back to it.
That's fine.
But he is a guy that started out as a young Earth creationist. He became an oil prospector. And to be an oil prospector requires you to read the geological record correctly. And he has produced, and I've got a link on my blog to all of his work. Morton,
I'd love to read that.
It's his name. And there's a link to Morton's archive on my blog. And he's got about 50 lines of evidence why the global flood couldn't have happened. All different lines of evidence.
Could you send that to me when you get a chance?
Yeah, I'll send you the link, and I'll explain to you what's there. And unfortunately, he died a few years ago, but he was very. He found a way in his own head to believe what he called to be a biblical believer, but he had his own interpretations in order to accommodate reality within it. So I got a great admiration for him, but as I say, he's passed on recently, but he's got some great material there.
I'd love to read that. I mean, it's just the evidence is just so overwhelming. And the other example I use is that a paleontologist who is looking, or who specializes in, say, placoderms, for example, will not go looking in Cretaceous outcrops for placoderms. They will not go looking for dinosaurs in the Carboniferous. They will not go looking for proboscideans in the Jurassic. I mean, it's just, we could just go on and on and on and on. You know, the fossil record, I was explaining this to someone, the fossil record is actually amazing. I remember the first time I was looking at the family tree of elephants. And I realized that they actually used to be hundreds of different species of elephantes, if you like, from tiny ones that size, from and for some that had 4 trunks, and some that had not trunks but like shovel tuskers.
I've seen images.
And the thing is, they didn't live at the same time. Crocodiles. I'm doing it again. It's another example. Anyway, let me go back to ERVs.
No, but it's a good point. It's a good point. Reality is so much more wonderful and interesting than this
Barry,
poverty-stricken image of a 6,000-year-old world that
it is.
God poofed everything into existence in one go.
It is so amazing. I remember when I first started learning about the variety of dinosaurs, the diversity of dinosaurs, how dinosaurs actually started really small. And so Herrerasaurus and Eoraptor and Coelophysis didn't share the planet with T-Rex and Spinosaurus. And I'm thinking, wow.
Yes.
And even before dinosaurs, crocodilians were everywhere.
Yeah.
Horned crocodiles, bipedal crocodiles, crocodiles with tusks, crocodiles with hoofs, crocodiles that were vegetarian crocodiles, which were probably on the magic boat. I mean, it was just, I was just like, wow, reality is so much more. It's why I enjoy learning, because I suddenly realized I don't know very much. And I want to educate myself, and I will continue doing this until the day I die. On that note, let's go back to ERVs. My next question is, I once read in an article by, I believe, National Geographic about the Phoenix virus.
Oh, yes. Very interesting.
Yeah, please elaborate on that.
Again, has to get a little bit technical.
That's fine.
Okay. But ERVs, people have concluded that the longer an ERV is around in your genome, the more likely it is to get corrupted by mutation, chopped up, and so forth. Because if it's not functional or not useful, it'll get corrupted.
Okay.
So the youngest ERVs are expected to be the most complete ones, because they haven't been in our genomes long enough to acquire lots and lots of mutations. There's a particular ERV in the human. Human ERVs are called HERVs, HERV, and these are HERV type K, but I don't know why, they're Ks. And as often happens, a retrovirus can infect a cell multiple times in the same DNA. So you get repeats of the endogenous retroviruses in each of your cells, in the DNA of each of your cells. So it turns out that all humans have multiple copies of HERV-K, HERV-K, in their DNA in each cell. The idea is that these have come recently from an external retrovirus, recent because they're not too corrupted, but nevertheless they're all disabled. Otherwise, if we had a non-disabled ERV in our genome, we'd never develop as organisms. It destroy the process. So ERVs, almost by definition, are non-functional. They have some mutations to them, but each of these may have a different mutation, because mutation is pretty random. So they said, let's look at the genome of each of these HERVs. And each of them contains a fault, and we reckon that they all have a different fault. If we arrange them all together, layer one on top of another, and have a look at what they call the consensus sequence. Most of these ERVs have an A base in this location. Most of them have a T in this location. This one is an exception. That's likely to be a mutation. So we'll ignore that, and we'll take the majority vote for each position of the genome of this ERV. So they reproduced this sequence, the consensus sequence, as they call it. Lo and behold, it produced a fully replication competent ERV, retrovirus. So
Wow.
they resurrected
They resurrected it, yeah.
a retrovirus.
Which is why they called it Phoenix.
Exactly, yeah. And they tested it. They tested it in petri dishes on human cells, and it would reinfect those cells, release more versions of that virus into the environment, and reinfect the cells again. Fully working retrovirus, resurrected from a number of dead ERVs, a number of corrupted ERVs. Remove the corruptions, and you get a fully working retrovirus. And I can't think of a better, although it's a little bit difficult to follow. And again, I'll give you some links to put in where
absolutely.
This experiment. I cannot think of a better proof that ERVs originated as retroviruses.
And
no
is
other
it
explanation can do it.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. And is it the case, if I remember correctly, that we also share these, in particular the HERV-K retroviruses, with other archaic humans? So I think I remember reading that Neanderthals have share a lot of these HERV-K retroviruses with us. And further down the road, we also share these retroviruses with other primates. So chimpanzees, bonobos, and gorillas to a lesser extent. Would you like to elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, you asked me this in conversation before. What do we expect to see from assuming or taking the position, at least, that humans and chimps and all the other primates are related to us? What's the difference between that data and the data that comes from more recent humans types, the Denisovians and Neanderthals and so forth? And it's basically down to how many shared ERVs the species have. If a species, and this is used as a tool for investigating the evolutionary history, if a species is more recently related to us or the other, it will have fewer divergences in the ERVs, because there's been less time for each species separately to acquire unique ERVs. So, for example, in living species, humans and the two chimpanzee species have the most ERVs in common.
Okay.
But they have a certain number which are unique to each species. And that reflects the amount of time that has passed since we split our evolutionary ways.
Yes.
So you go back to gorillas, there are still most of the ERVs are in common between chimpanzees and gorillas and humans, but there are more divergences. There are more unique ERVs in gorillas as compared to. You go to the more recent human species, you have fewer ERVs which are unique to them. And this is just another, as I was talking about consilience, all the evidence coming together to confirm the view that we have formed. So the unique ERVs in Neanderthals and the other earlier humans are fewer than the unique ERVs when we compare humans to chimps and gorillas, etc.
So if I were to... Sorry, go on.
So we conclude that those species diverged from us more recently than the others.
So if I were to break it down in simpler terms, I would say that the gradient of genetic similarities that you find in our nuclear genome between humans and Neanderthals and Denisovans and gorillas and bonobos and chimpanzees is exactly the same thing you find with these retroviruses. So we share more similarities with Neanderthals but a bit less with chimpanzees,
Yes. Yeah.
a bit less with gorillas, because apparently bonobos and chimpanzees are more or less the same,
Pretty well the same.
equidistant to humans. And so the argument I always put forward is even the gradient of genetic similarities alone tells its own story. Why would there be a gradient in the first place? Why would human beings have a gradient of genetic similarities between any apes? We should be equally distant, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We should be equally distant to all animals and stand alone. And so, God, it's so
another way of
frustrating.
thinking of it is that the more recent speciation splits from the other species, the fewer differences there are.
Yes.
Fewer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So yeah, and again, it all hangs together. It all hangs together with all the other evidence we have of when these species split. Yeah.
It is. It's fascinating, but it's even more fascinating. I remember when I found out that some of these ERVs also played a role in our evolution. I believe Carl Zimmer wrote an article years ago called "Mammals Made by Viruses."
Oh yes.
And he talked about the role of the syncytin gene.
Yes.
Please explain that to our viewers.
Okay.
So
Creationists love this. They think it's a gotcha.
Well, ain't that a surprise?
But it's because it is an enzyme that is used to create syncytial layers, which is a very, very important part of forming the placenta. Okay, so we have in our DNA a gene that creates syncytin that helps us produce a placenta. If you knock that gene out, and other mammals, all placental mammals have this, but it's an essential part of a placenta. You knock this out in mice. You knock out gene. You've heard of knockout, genetic knockout mice. You knock that gene out, disable it, they can not reproduce. They cannot produce placenta. So the creationists crow that, how could this have come about after the development of this species? They would never have been able to reproduce. It's essential. It's a typical example of what was originally called interlocking complexity. Michael Behe, the
irreducible complexity,
it from Muller and called it irreducible complexity.
Yeah, irreducible complexity and the bacterium flagellum.
Basically, yeah. Basically, is if you come up with something and it's useful, you come to rely on it, and everything else that you used before can erode away, and it becomes essential. So it's no surprise that you've got something that has become essential. And the interesting thing about syncytin is that several things about it, actually. They are in the position of the ENV gene that we've mentioned before, the gene that makes the virus attach to the host cell.
Okay.
And to virtually merge the viral particle with the cell. And that syncytin gene is located in exactly the same location in an ERV as you would expect to find in an ENV gene. So it is essentially an ENV gene.
Okay.
And interestingly, HIV has this trick. It's never been known to endogenize. HIV has never been known to enter our genomes. But out in the world and in the environment where it infects people, it has a trick of absorbing T cells, the defenders of the immune cells. And its trick is to use its ENV gene to make these cells merge all together into a multicellular glob.
Wow.
It's a huge cell with lots of nuclei that have come from the cells it's absorbed. This is exactly the same action as the syncytin gene that is used to create placenta in us. Another interesting thing is that it appears to have happened multiple times during evolution, because you can find this syncytin gene being used in exactly the same way in different species.
Mm-hmm.
It is embedded in the ENV gene position of whichever ERV is involved, but they're different ERVs.
Okay.
And it is even in different chromosomes, entirely different chromosomes. So this is evidence that syncytin has been co-opted by evolution to create placentae in several cases. It's taken a certain ERV in us. In fact, I think there are two in us.
Yeah, there's two.
Another one in mice, another one in whatever placental mammals. And by the way, because they appear in lineages, it's just more evidence for evolution. These have been inherited by different lineages of species, different groups of species.
It's funny you say that, because I was about to ask the question. So does that then mean that the syncytin gene wasn't directly inherited from the common ancestor of all placental mammals then?
No.
Okay.
Or if it was, it's been replaced by better versions. Another ERV has come along, and the organism has found that's a more effective way to build a.
Because
I
clearly
think there is some evidence of that happening.
Okay.
For example, I think we have two different syncytin genes in different ERVs. I'm not certain of that. I'd have to look it up, but I seem to recall that that's the case. So it's been co-opted by evolution many times.
And that happened. And we know
one original one that created the radiation of placental mammals because it gave an advantage. But then along comes another ERV, and evolution says, metaphorically, of course, evolution says,
evolution doesn't say anything.
We'll use that, and then the old one disappears, and that gives the illusion of irreducible complexity. How did it happen that we got there? We went up this ladder and got to this point, and then we kicked the ladder away, and it's not magic.
It really is an amazing thing. Our relationship with, and I'm just digressing slightly now, because I never it never fails to amaze me how we are wholly dependent on our microbial squatters, I like to call them.
Yeah. In the bloodstream, in the guts, and but also in the DNA. There's a book. Hold on a sec. I'll just pick it up.
Sure.
Apart from this guy I was talking about, this expert, the latest one I was looking at was this. Let's see if I can make it visible. Bioevolution.
Oh yeah, I've got a soft copy of that.
It's a bit of hype. Most important book, but he makes a strong case that it's a symbiosis in our bodies. We are symbiotic. Yeah, even at the level of our DNA. Sorry, even at the level of our DNA, there are symbiotes. So you can view ERVs as symbiotic with us.
Well,
so whatever DNA is found to be useful, because if you accept that ERVs originated as retroviruses,
right,
they have lost their path to replication other than being in our genomes. They cannot force our cells to make more retroviruses. Their only path to the future is to be useful in our DNA.
Yeah.
So they are symbiotic in the sense that a lot of bits of ERVs are useful for us, and we are useful for the ERVs. We reproduce, and we reproduce the ERVs for them, rather than them doing it directly and causing us disease.
There has been recent articles. I believe I posted a couple. I might have tagged you actually, where they show evidence that some of the remnants of ERVs in our genome actually helps defend us against new viruses.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, and recently I've noticed that creationists have been making a big deal of this.
Oh, so what?
It must be designed to help us ward off infections. But when you look at retroviruses that invade our somatic cells, they're not endogenous. They just invade our cells. They do exactly the same sort of thing. So it's not designed to stop us being invaded by retroviruses. It's not built into our genomes to do that. The genetics is already there in the retrovirus. And the reasoning for that, again, I've got a page I can give you a link to.
Okay.
The reason for that is that a virus gets into a cell, and an important thing for it to do is to deal with the competition. Stop other retroviruses getting in.
It's a battle for survival. Yeah.
So that destroys the argument that it was designed into the genome in order to protect us from, because retroviruses do this anyway.
Sorry, Byron. They need to shut up, because they cannot make. I don't think they think before they say stuff, because God created pathogens because two people listened to a talking snake, and that's why sin came into the world, and they call it the fall, right?
Yeah.
And then the same God says, I want these microbes to kill you, but I'm also going to give you bits of pieces of stuff to defend yourself. But then I'm also going to give the same viruses ways to get around your defenses.
Compartmentalized thinking.
It's insane.
You have this problem. Oh, that's the answer to it. You have this problem. You have that. The two don't go together. It doesn't matter to them. It doesn't matter. And they will clutch at straws.
My children have disappointed me, Barry.
The what?
Therefore, I'm just using this as an analogy. My children have disappointed me. They ate some magic cake in the fridge because a talking dog told them to. Therefore, I'm going to create something to come and shoot them, right? This is what I'm going to do. He's going to shoot them, and then I'm going to give them toothpicks to defend themselves with, to shoot the other guy. But no, I'm going to give the other guy a bulletproof. It just makes no sense. The arms race that you see in the natural world, when they talk about original sin, I don't think they really understand how insane it sounds. I don't think they understand that when they talk about pathogens, say bacteria, for example, and then we discover antibiotics, and then they say it was God that helped us find it. But then you find out that bacteria have also evolved resistance to the antibiotics. And not only do they do that, they can share it with their mates who haven't actually got the resistance genes. They can go, hello, mate. Oh, what? You ain't got one? Oh, here you go. Horizontal gene transfer. You can have one. Oh, never mind. It's please, just. You have my utmost respect that you continue to engage these people
It's a
when
challenge.
how can it not be original sin? How can anybody who claims to worship a benevolent deity of any kind even believe such a thing?
No. It's just not fair anyway. What have I done? And what are the mechanics of it? How do you inherit it? We know all about inheritance. It's all in DNA. So, what is the DNA for original sin? It's just, but this is what they have been indoctrinated to believe. Yeah.
It was what ancient people used to try and justify what they didn't understand.
Well, that's understandable. It's always happened. But we move on. We learn and we move on. Some of us do it.
Not like this we did. Not like this we did. Not like this we